Okay, well, welcome to our Georgia Chamber Resiliency and Recovery Town Hall meeting this afternoon with Speaker David Ralston. I want to thank all of you for joining us and the Georgia Hispanic Chamber, our partner as always on these town hall calls. I want to remind you that we have another town hall this upcoming Thursday with the head of DOT and the Georgia Ports Authority. And tomorrow, the Chamber will start our resiliency roundtables. We'll have leaders of 3 of our studios here in Georgia to talk about what's happening in the film and TV industry and the impact that the virus and the pandemic have had on them. Also want to encourage and remind you to join us on social media and to visit our webpage, gachamber.com/COVID-19 with the latest updates. We have published recently, I think in the last few hours here, guidelines for the PPP loan forgiveness that was just released from the Treasury Department earlier today. You can obviously get that same information over at the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce's website as well. You know, we started these town hall meetings about 8 weeks ago because we wanted to let the business community know what was happening with our government leaders in response to the pandemic. And over the last few calls, we really turned our attention now more to the recovery and Georgia's resiliency as we move forward. But I think part of the credit for the incredible response and the fact that we're now 18 days of lower recorded virus here in the state of Georgia is the incredible work of our good friend, Speaker David Ralston. Governor Kemp's done an incredible job, but he does it with an incredible team, and it's a partnership at the Capitol. And we know, Speaker Ralston, you play an incredible part in that on many, many levels. And we really appreciate you taking time out of a very busy schedule to spend a few minutes with our members this afternoon. We'd love to get kind of your thoughts and your feedback about where we are in the recovery, and particularly as we start looking to that next session and the partnership that business plays with the state of Georgia and the impact that we're going to have from budgets, what that looks like and how we can partner. So, Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us. Thank you for what you do every day, and we'd love to get an update from you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris and Santiago and all the members that have joined with us this afternoon. I'm honored to be with you and to have a few minutes to share with you a little bit about where we've been and where we're going in state government with what has truly been and still is a very unprecedented period in our history as a state, nation, and even globally. When I step back and think about, that when we started the session back in January and even the first few weeks of the session, when this was not even on our radar, and to think, how things have been reset by this pandemic is kind of, to use an expression, is kind of mind-boggling, and it takes a lot to kind of wrap your brain around what has happened and where we are. You will all remember that on March 13, at the end of Legislative Day 29, we suspended the 2020 session of the General Assembly due to the rising number of cases of COVID-19. We did come back in on March 16 for the one-day special session to ratify the governor's declaration of a public health emergency. And since that time, we have been out of session. That does not mean we have been holed up and not doing anything. I can tell you that our team here in this office has been probably busier than we have been at any point since I've been speaker, beginning in the immediate aftermath of the suspension, reacting and trying to help our members, House members, get through this period when they had many, many questions, trying to be sure that that they were getting their input in on having resources in their community. We devoted a lot of time to that. We've also been meeting with groups like this on virtual platforms to talk about where we are and where we're going, and really trying to get some ideas on what we can do once we kind of get to where we can say that the curve has been flattened, to get Georgia back on a strong economic footing, and grow our prosperity again. So we started in early April, meeting with the appropriations people, Chairman Terry England and his team. We started meeting with them. They have then now transitioned into meeting jointly with the Senate Appropriations team, and looking at basically rebuilding a state budget. We had passed a budget out of the House a few days before the suspension, a budget for fiscal year 21. That went over to the Senate, and well, needless to say, that budget has kind of long since been rendered obsolete, and we're going to have to really, and already have started the process of coming back in and rebuilding the budget. It's going to be a very painful and challenging time to make the kind of cuts that I think we're going to have to make. The House and Senate appropriation teams, as well as OPB, have agreed and reached a consensus on asking the departments and agencies to submit proposed budgets containing 14% cuts to their budget. And I can tell you a 14% cut in one fiscal year is substantial. So we're trying to identify some areas now where we can make those cuts. You know, the problem with running a lean, balanced budget as we do here in Georgia is there's not much to cut from, and so. But I know that they're coming up with some ideas that we'll begin talking publicly about after the beginning of the month. We started about 3 or 4 weeks ago looking at a resumption of the session. I thought it was important that we wait until June. I think now we have a consensus on a June start date, because I think it's critical that we give our appropriation committees the most current, up-to-date information that we can give them as they make these challenging decisions. And in addition to that, obviously, the governor's going to need some time to revise his revenue estimate, and we will not have the complete April numbers in until the last day or so of May. So that was sort of my reasoning in proposing a June beginning date. So we'll select a hard date here soon, and we're continuing to have dialogue with the Senate. They at first wanted to come back on May 14th, which would have been last week. And I think now they realize that was probably way premature, but we'll get there on that, and we'll come back in session. A lot of people have been asking, well, what is session going to look like? Well, it's going to look a little different. I have a bipartisan committee that I appointed here in the House, led by Majority Leader Burns and Minority Leader Trammell. They've been heading up a team of other members and staff here in the House to look at some ways that we can do our work. We can do it in an open, transparent way, but yet be safe to our members. We have a number of members who are in the so-called vulnerable category, and due to age, and some have some underlying health issues, and certainly we're trying to factor in consideration of those things. I expect that within the next week to 10 days, they will have their final recommendations. They produced their first set of recommendations last week. We will begin with some pretty basic things that we actually implemented before the suspension, in that we terminated for the rest of this session the page program in the House. That will continue. There will not be any pages. We will not have guests on the floor of the House. The floor will be strictly limited to members and staff. The gallery, where we're not, I want to emphasize this because I got blamed before the suspension for trying to shut the public out of the gallery. That was never what we tried to do, never what I said we wanted to do. But I did discourage the public from coming because there's nothing that they could see there that they couldn't see live streamed. And so we're going to encourage the public without keeping them away. We're going to encourage them to not come, but to live stream our sessions. The access points to the Capitol will be limited, and we will check health condition of members and guests. And by guests, I mean those who are here advocating for their clients, and the media and others that need to be here. We'll be taking their temperature and scrutinizing them when they come in, and regardless of how many times they come in each day. So we're trying to make it as safe as is possible. The other area I wanted to touch on that a lot of people have an interest in is, other than the budget, which kind of is an unusual way of saying things, nothing matters but the budget in the period of time we have remaining. We have to pass a balanced budget. We have to get that to the governor by June 30 for him to sign. That will be our focus primarily. I know that there's interest in other matters. I get suggestions every day from people who said, well, you know, I had a little bill last session. You think we can kind of run that one through? I said, well, no, not everybody's going to get a little bill run through. What I've asked the leadership team in the House to do, and my understanding is, I don't want to speak for him, that the Lieutenant Governor either will or has already asked his members to do, is to prioritize the legislation they want to try to get across the finish line, recognizing that we'll be dealing with a very, very limited period of time on these other issues, because the budget will suck up most of the oxygen in the room, but there may be some room for some other things. I like to try to find the silver lining when at all possible. I tell people that I was here in 2010 as Speaker when we went through a tough economic period. It was kind of the bottom of the Great Recession, and we did a lot of cutting in that session. it was a very difficult session to get through, but we did. And not only did we come out of it, and I know the magnitude of this problem is far exceeds that, but it's a fairly good model to go by. We not only came out of that, but we implemented some reforms after that, such as tax reform, some regulatory reform, and some other initiatives that put us on the track to being selected the #1 state in the nation in which to do business for 7 years in a row. So if we can bounce back like that from that problem, I know that we're going to bounce back from this one. And we certainly welcome the help of and need the help of the business community with your wisdom and your experience and your being out there creating jobs and keeping people at work every day. That's the kind of knowledge that we need, and so we're going to have definitely have a place at the table for business here in Georgia, and we look forward to working with you. And Chris, I'll stop there and be happy to field questions in the time we have left. Always enjoy doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'll let Santiago, I'll let you kick us off.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think you've covered a lot of ground there, and thank you for your leadership. And I want to thank Chris and the Georgia Chamber for their partnership, and Chris being a mentor to me has really helped us react very quickly. A lot of our businesses, and I know this is true in our chamber, are somewhat hesitant or afraid to reopen because of liability. And are there any reassurances, or do you think that's something that will be dealt with as you go back into session?
Well, Santiago, I'm open to looking at some targeted ways that we can help those businesses deal with the issues that have come out of the pandemic. You know, if you get into the issue in a very general and broad kind of way, obviously that becomes a much longer, protracted discussion. I know I've had some suggestions along those lines, and we're going to take a look at those. And because I do hear that concern, I hear that from businesses in my community that are frankly very, very worried about that. And so, to the extent that we can target some changes to the law that will address those specific concerns, then that's a discussion I'm willing to have. Again, time permitting.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great to hear you say that. I want to go back to the budget if I can for a few minutes, because I know
Sure.
that's the priority for you. And like you, I was running a department during 2008, 9, and 10, and had to cut 40% out of my budget. But I do remember how we worked hard together. The Chamber and the General Assembly passed 13 bills in 2011 and 12 to lead that recovery during that time. And one of the things that I keep going back to is the fact that you balanced the state budget, you made hard decisions, and we didn't increase taxes. We actually made us more competitive. We did a poll last weekend that showed 88% of Georgians were worried about higher taxes in the future because of those shortfalls. And so my first question is, do you think we can move through this crisis without raising taxes? And number two, do you think there's an opportunity here for relief from the Federal Reserve? I know they've got a facility they're standing up to help the states. Have you seen any support out of that, out of the federal government yet, or do you expect any support?
Well, on the tax question, Chris, I certainly, my bias is certainly against tax increases. I don't think that's if we're going to grow this economy back, and if we're going to recover in a strong and sustained way, I don't think we're going to do that by raising taxes. I certainly intend, for the House at least, to avoid, you know, getting, going into that. You always have, people have different proposals on that. I know back in 2010, you mentioned that, I'd be in my office and different people would come in and meet with me, and they all had a solution, and most of them involved a tax increase of some kind. And well, we came through that without raising taxes, and we actually did tax reform. You remember one of the bills that we passed, I guess it was 2012, was to take the sales tax off of energy manufacturing, which was a huge stimulus to a significant part of our economy here in the state. So that's where I am on tax increases. Now, on the federal government, the feds are there. I get a little confused watching them up there, and frankly, but I know the House passed a stimulus package late last week that apparently is not even going to be taken up in the Senate. So the Senate, I guess, now will put together a plan. I'm not sure what their process will be, but I'm hopeful that they will step up and help the states. And many people, Chairman England and others, are kind of anxious to see what we can count on or not count on in terms of some federal assistance for budget purposes. And here again, you look at the things that we're kind of being victimized because of the way we have managed in a conservative, responsible way. And then you look, and I'm not going to name names of other states, but other states are wanting this help for, frankly, to cure some mismanagement problems that have existed for decades. And I don't want to see Georgia have to pay a price for that, or any other state that has managed responsibly during this period of time. So I think we're in a wait and see posture with them in terms of how much and when. But I'm still hopeful that we'll get some relief out of the federal government.
Well, thank you, Chris. Mr. Speaker, what advice do you have for Georgia's businesses as they try to reopen safely? Any words of wisdom that you can share with them?
I don't know, Santiago, that I think somebody said it best a couple of weeks ago when the restrictions were being lifted on certain businesses. We're not making them reopen. We're simply permitting them to reopen. And a lot of businesses, both whether they're here in downtown Atlanta or in downtown Blue Ridge, have made the decision to not yet reopen, and that's a decision they get to make. And I think every business has to make that the way they feel appropriate for them. I have not talked to a single business owner that doesn't want to reopen, because what I'm hearing from them is just this great amount of loyalty and appreciation that they have for their employees, and they want to put them back to work, and they want them to make money and be productive, and so I think everybody's got to do it the way they deem best. So I would just encourage them to continue doing that. This is more of a cheer than it is advice, I guess, but I just applaud the great appreciation that they have shown to their employees. It's just been kind of been a really, really neat thing to see.
Mr. Speaker, as a follow-up there, we're looking at your backdrop of lovely downtown Blue Ridge, which we all wish we were there, going to Oyster Fly Rod and then heading out this afternoon. But I know that of all the industries in Georgia, the hospitality industry has really been hit the hardest. Many of those facilities are still closed down, like our amusement parks. We know the impact of Delta to many of our hotels in Georgia. I'm curious what you're hearing from your constituents back home that are in the tourism industry and what your thoughts are about how we help them rebound and recover, because they've literally lost a whole, one of the most important quarters of the year for operations and for revenue, and then they're going into a very uncertain summer.
Well, that's a great point, and that is absolutely true that the tourism industry took a huge hit. Still taking a hit. I mean, you look at Delta and you see some of the numbers that are just staggering about how air travel has dropped, and that's the largest private employer in the state of Georgia. I think it may sort of reorient travel. If some of you may remember during the Great Recession, I would keep up. This was even before I was speaker, but I'd keep up with the local chamber about how tourism was doing. And because I'm reading stories even then about, the tourism industry was hit at that time.
Right.
But what happened was it gained within the state.
Right.
So we have a little concept that somebody shared with me a few days ago called a staycation. And the cabin industry, for example, in the mountains is back to being full. If you don't have a cabin now and you want one the next couple, 3 months, you're going to have to really look hard to find one, because people who might have gone to Florida, might have gone to the Caribbean, might have gone wherever, they're staying closer and kind of finding new and good things to do. And I suspect Oyster is going to sell a lot of those rods this summer.
I'm sure he hopes so and takes that to heart. Santiago, any last comments or thoughts before we wrap things up and let the speaker go?
Yeah, I really didn't get a chance to thank the speaker. The speaker's been a great friend to our chamber, been a great friend to our businesses and to the Hispanic community, and his door has always been open. And I can personally testify to that, as I've been at the chamber since 2008. So I just want to thank you, sir, for your leadership. Having your door open to us means a lot to us to have you in that position.
Well, thank you, Santiago, and thank you to the Hispanic business community here in Georgia, which is has enriched our economy and added just a tremendous energy. And I want you to please convey my deep appreciation for what they're doing to move Georgia forward.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you. I just had a note from one of our lobbyist friends who said he appreciated you calling the lobbyist guest. That was first time he'd been called a guest, and he was appreciative of that.
Well, he might not appreciate this story. The ideas, and I'll finish on this note. One of the ideas we had to keep the Capitol not full of people was to not admit lobbyists into the Capitol during the remainder of the session. We weren't going to exclude them from the proceedings, but we were going to put them in a tent here on the grounds of the Capitol and let them get live feeds out there of what was going on. And so he probably didn't like that one as much as the other. But
probably not, but I could see it like a big tailgate party across the street there in Liberty Square. I thought y'all were in there. There's an idea there somewhere.
I'm not going to go to that.
It's a different way to lobby. Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you for what you do. We're here to work with you through this Recovery and Resiliency Task Force that our chamber has launched, just like we did in 2010. We want to be a partner with you. We'll be sharing those ideas that we're getting from all of our members all over the state of Georgia. I would encourage those that are following us today to join us tomorrow for our Resiliency Roundtable and then again on Thursday. And Mr. Speaker, again, thank you, and we'll continue to pray for you and the members of the House as you guys continue to lead our state. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Take care.